Well, it's election year 2024, and it is a highly contested, hot topic for this year. And this is an urgent message for pastors all across America. As a pastor myself, I understand that there are issues that pastors have to keep in mind. And so the National Faith Advisory Board has been so generous to develop the Pastor's Bill of Rights. Now, the Pastor's Bill of Rights clearly lists out all the rights that pastors have regarding speaking about and teaching about and holding to their conscience regarding religious freedom and what they say to their congregation. So once again, I want to thank the National Faith Advisory Board for producing this. And as of today, it's September 30th, 2024. And we only have a few days to get people registered to vote. If they are not registered, we have till October 7th of 2024. So this message is for pastors. It is for people who really believe in fighting for religious freedom, who stand for those freedoms for us. So I want to talk to you real briefly about what the rights are for each pastor to be able to speak about in his or her congregation. So we're going to start with pastors' freedom of speech and of expression. First of all, the pastors have the right to freely express their religious beliefs, including in matters of morality, ethics, and public policy, without fear of censorship or repercussion. While pastors do have that right, unfortunately, even I speak for myself, I think most of us can say that we have been highly censored in one form or another. But if you're a pastor and you're watching this, you should know that you have a right to speak freely about morality issues, ethics, and public policy without fear of repercussion or censorship. I believe, like I just stated, the censorship may happen, but you should also be free from the freedom of fearing that something might happen because you're speaking on these things. The next one is freedom of conscience. You have the right to adhere to and teach your sincerely held beliefs without being compelled to violate your conscience or tenets of faith. You know, the goal has been from many who are aggressively trying to shut down religious freedom to keep pastors from speaking about things that they have a conscience about, that they, through a conviction to a sacred text, have decided where their moral values lie. So pastors, understand you have freedom of conscience. The next one is freedom from discrimination. Pastors shall not be discriminated against on the basis of their religious beliefs or practices, and are free to make personnel decisions, including hiring, promotion, or termination, in accordance with their religious beliefs and without government interference. Because of the push for everything being a discrimination, pastors today do fear that they are going to be in trouble and accused of discrimination. When in fact, when a pastor has such a high conviction, again, through the sacred text, which is the Bible for us, sometimes those fears arise and they get afraid of who they're not going to hire, because if those people do not line up with their theological stances, then they're afraid that they may incur some issues there because of discrimination. But they have the right to decide based on their theology. And by the way, this happens across the board from Christian to Christian, because even within the Christian community, there are places where we disagree. And so that's going to happen all across the board. Freedom to address policy issues. Pastors have the right to address policy issues from a moral and ethical standpoint, including sermons, teachings, and other church activities, especially when it affects their congregants, without fear of retribution or of loss of exempt status. That's one of the things that is being pushed for right now. There's a lot of people who despise religion, and they would like for churches to lose their tax exempt status. One of the things that people forget, though, it is churches who actually come in during the crisis. They are the ones that reach to people who have major disadvantages. They're out there doing outreaches, et cetera, et cetera. So that's part of the reason why a church gets tax exempt status. So some people just say snatch it off. And then, of course, when you add these things that pastors are wanting to stand for today, the pressure has only increased. Then there's freedom to register voters. And this is where I think it's very important to talk about right now. Pastors, you need to push as much as possible for your people to register to vote. I think a lot of us have failed to push it as much because we're afraid, again, of the repercussions, not just through the people who do not like religion, but even through your proper congregants, through the very congregants that sit in your midst and say pastors should not be politically or governmentally involved. However, if we are honest, you as a pastor are supposed to teach your people. And if what's happening in our government is going to affect the families of the United States, particularly the God-fearing families, then it is our job to stand up and help people register to vote. So as the 2024 election, presidential election, and along with other elected official offices, the deadline to register is October 7th. You can do that online. Just Google official registration, voter registration link, and you should be able to find that pretty quickly. The next one is freedom from unwanted governmental intrusion. Pastors have the right to be free from unwarranted governmental intrusion into matters of internal church governance, doctrine, and religious practice consistent with the principles of separation and church and of church and state. That means that the government cannot come in and tell you what you should do within your services, what you cannot do within your services. This is part of the reason why during the pandemic there were so many churches upset. There was too much encroaching of the government. The next one is freedom from threats and intimidation. Pastors shall be protected from threats or intimidation based on their religious beliefs, teachings, or practices. And then, of course, freedom of assembly, freedom of association, and freedom of legal representation. I'm going to skip the other two, and I'm going to get to freedom of legal representation. Pastors shall have the right to obtain legal representation and receive due process in any legal proceedings that may affect their rights, privileges, or duties as religious leaders. And the Bill of Rights seeks to affirm the fundamental freedoms and protections that pastors require to fulfill their sacred responsibilities and serve their communities with integrity, compassion, and faithfulness. This is a call for all pastors to rise up, to be unafraid and unapologetic and get people to go out, register to vote. But it goes beyond getting people to register to vote. Clearly, there's a division, even within the church, about who is going to be the best candidate. Number one, we can all say that Jesus is Lord, that he is in charge, and yes, he is, but he's also given us, the Father has given us responsibility here on the earth. And if we know that we are getting to a point where we are very close for our nation to turn over, and in the end, it still will. But until then, we are responsible for raising up responsible people who belong to the United States, who are part of the United States, especially in the body of Christ. Now, there's such a division because there's so much blindedness about character. And the truth is, if we look at candidates right now, it's not like they're running on godly character, regardless of who you look at. But we are looking at people who are trying to support policies and laws that protect our nation and that protect our religious liberty. Now, voting for certain people is going to accelerate us into a dark place where traditional values and traditional families are going to be torn down. Pastors, I'm calling you to listen to these Pastors' Bill of Rights and those that apply to you today. I read them for you. Thanks again to the National Faith Advisory Board. For more information, be sure that you visit their website so that you can become more aware about what is going on and what your responsibility is and what resources you have available to you. Thank you so much. I'm Teresa Lusk.